Vusa, because you're hosting and because you bought breakfast for us today, what are the biggest obstacles to this sensible and, one would hope, fruitful collaboration between local government and shopping malls? And what kind of collaboration and services are we looking for?
Jeremy, morning everyone. I think having worked in the shopping center industry, in the property industry, shopping centers bring benefit to a lot of stakeholders. The people in the area, the municipalities through revenue generation, etc. And shopping centers act as a catalyst for further developments in the area where they're situated. So they bring even more benefits. I think one of the biggest obstacles that we've got is that sometimes there's not a common understanding that our successes are intertwined between ourselves and municipal officials. A few months ago, we opened up a shopping center in Abakulusi, formerly Vryheid. And that shopping center had been delayed by many years because of approvals. In this case, actually, the municipality was quite supportive. It was actually at a national level where it took us a while to get the water use license. We've developed the shopping center, performing very well. We created, currently there are over 200 people employed who were not employed in Vryheid. And during the construction, there were a lot more people. So to understand that collaboration between private sector and business is good, we need to get that understanding that we need to work together to attract investment, to build a conducive environment for investment, because that drives the economy and that drives employment. Secondly, I think there is not enough personal working relationships between retail personnel and civil servants. It's easy for me to phone a retailer, any retailer in South Africa, and say, I've got an opportunity here and here, please come along. But I don't have many contacts at municipalities. And they're an important stakeholder in our ecosystem. So as an industry, we both need to work to build and foster those relationships. A silly example, at the moment, we're doing a development somewhere in Joburg, and the municipality there is working from home. So you're not able to get a hold of people.
Did you say working from hope or home?
I hope working from home. I think something is wrong with their office building. To get decisions made is difficult. And I don't have anyone that I can personally phone and say, I've got this problem. Can you help or connect me to the correct people? So I think, as I said, as an industry, we need to foster those relationships. And what services do we require from our partners in local government? Well, it's simple. Functioning infrastructure drives investments, and that drives jobs and everything else. So we need the basics done. We need service delivery.
How do you go about fostering and developing those personal relationships that have been alluded to? What's the silver bullet here?
Thanks, Jeremy, and thank you firstly for that amazing keynote address. I think you gave us a lot of food for thought that I made a lot of notes about. So I hope we'll get an opportunity to also comment on that.
Am I going to be in a campaign speech? I fear I am.
Not at all, not
Thank
at
you.
all.
Okay.
But if you were, it would be a good one.
Thank you.
But what does it mean to work together? I think the starting point, and I'm picking up of where Vusa has left off, is there's evidently over time the trust deficit and the mutual suspicion between public and private sector has grown to a level that actually makes it very difficult to have constructive discussions and even do just basic things like development and getting details of the people that you need to be contacting. And it's that's the output, but the input is a failed politics, really. As citizens, as private sector, we see the impact of the failed politics around us, be it the corruption, be it the poor leadership, be it the various different scandals that we are just bombarded with every day. And on the other side, you have a sort of political leadership that has become increasingly hostile, and that becomes the terrain you now are trying to navigate, where people are not able to actually work together. So our sense is that it really does start with the leadership, the governance, and the people that you have in the room, and the people that you appoint at local municipality and at provincial government. One, ensuring that you have people that are adequately capacitated, adequately skilled to do their job, and that you are able to entrench a culture that, one, let me say, depoliticizes, economic development, property development, and the basics of just getting things right. I mean, you talk also about infrastructure development. Something so simple, ends up not being possible because of issues of corruption, issues of politicization, et cetera, and of course, capacity. So our sense is that's really where the blockage is. It's a human capital issue. It's having people who are sitting across the table from each other, but are fundamentally, within a culture of distrust. And that is unfortunately just a societal thing that has happened over time. But that's what we need to fix in the politics.
All right, let's talk a little bit about building trust in a moment, but I want to ask you a question, a very blunt one. Why would you talk about the importance of skills capacity and hiring the right people, why would anyone in their right mind want to work for local government right now when so much of it is broken?
And that's a brilliant question, because that's exactly what's wrong. What's wrong is that the worst people in society are the most willing to work in those spaces. And the most capable people in society are the least willing. But yet this is the area that is the most important for us to get society working. And it's a function of exactly what has gone wrong in politics. And so over time, and I mean, to really kind of double down on why Rise Mzansi exists, it was precisely to deal with this issue, because when observing the politics from the outside, we can sort of complain about everything that's happening there, but nobody wants to go there. And how do we get the worst people in politics? It's not a coincidence. It's a function of how the politics works. So for example, we are now going to elections. We are voting for whatever color t-shirt you may like, but you have absolutely no input or say on who the 80 people are going to be in the provincial legislature, or the 400 people are going to be making laws on our behalf in the national legislature. That's all internal party politics that determines those outcomes. And those are the people and the ministers and the MECs that eventually determine who actually gets to be appointed to sit in the positions that you and I would likely interface with, when we want to actually get things done. And so if we don't deal with the politics part of it, we don't get the outcomes we want. And so we need to see a fundamental shift of the politics to make it more attractive for people like myself, yourself, and others to come in and out of politics.
But Alan, it's not just the politics. It's also at a more practical level. It is developer talking to functionary. To Vuyiswa's point about the trusts quotient, as far as that is concerned. So I get the politics, that you got to fix the politics, but it's also about the importance of making sure that trust across the table exists. Tell me why it's broken and how you fix it.
Easy question.
And then everyone can have breakfast. And before you answer the question, ladies and gentlemen, what I like to do with these panel discussions is, if you want to chip in, just put up your hand and I'll work you into the conversation. There's nothing worse than having the conversation and then questions afterwards. And then what often happens is it becomes like a political party press conference. We ask 6 questions and then the panel members choose the one they want to answer. So let's not do that. If you've got a comment or disagree or agree with anyone, put up your hand. I will recognize you. Alan, back to you.
Right. Yeah. So I think it's a very astute observation that gap between the public and the private sector is just growing, and there's a huge amount of distrust on both sides. I think that, related to it is that we live in a very a highly regulated industry, the development industry. There's probably up to 30 different development permits and approvals that you can need to get on a development. More than 30 different studies that you need to do to support those permits, and it's often taking 30 months to get it. And I think that what's happened because of this rift, and maybe some other factors as well, is that we've shifted into an era in the public sector where the focus is more on compliance than on delivery. So every public sector official is very scared of making decisions at this stage. I had a colleague who, on any matter that he got, whether it was a small decision or a big decision, he would simply put it in his inbox for 3 months to wait and see what the noise would arise over this particular decision.
So management by inertia, in other words.
Correct, yeah.
So what are they scared of?
You don't, well,
Risk.
of being found to be corrupt, to be irregular. And I think it's interesting, I reflect back on my career in the public service and saying that a lot of the things that I did were probably very irregular. And in this environment, just in terms of getting development done, you'd actually be found out, you'd be accused of corruption, and that's basically the public sector's main issue at the moment, is being found out and accused of corruption, being investigated continually, and having to justify their existence. So I think there's a bit of a negative impact of the culture that we're living in at the moment, and it's definitely not supportive of development, because you need to take risks to get development going. As you
Let's
out.
bring in the organization Undoing Tax Abuse, OUTA. You've got to have the compliance. You've got to have the mechanism. Otherwise, it just becomes a free-for-all. So how do you find the balance between getting that side of it right, the compliance, and making sure that you've done all the right things, but making sure that you can speed up the process a little bit more to everybody's benefit? Or have we reached a point where we can't do that anymore because we are just like rabbits in the headlight? We're just so scared of what the consequences are, and therefore everything grinds to a halt. That's a terribly badly phrased question, but I think you know what I'm saying.
Thank you, Jeremy, and thanks for that introduction that you've put in the beginning. If you look at compliance, it doesn't really dictate the performance of a municipality, and I think that's a problem that we're referring to here. The Auditor General has powers to go after the individual now, and a lot of times the individual is actually just trying to do their job, where it doesn't root out corruption. That's the problem that we're facing. So I think the complexity of municipal legislation and to get the work done it's over-regulated, and that needs to change. But I think if you look at some of the previous conversations that you've just had, there's two real big issues. The one is to get professional, good leaders to take these positions of management, and from a political and an administrative point of view. And the political side needs to step out of the business of the administration. Every time you see a political change, administration comes to a halt. Doesn't matter if the budget's been approved or not, and it gets channeled in a different direction. And the political side, which no one's talking about, is it's become an entity that's very greedy. What I'm saying when I mention that is political parties these days really look at the staff creating the most value that can climb the corporate ladder. If you look at a councillor, anyone can become a councillor. And you can go from 0 to 34,000 rand a month. And it's about what value do you add to that political party. And the reason I'm saying this, Jeremy, is political parties don't care about municipal administration anymore. It's about having the power, and it's about the greed. And as you've heard earlier, we don't have a say on who those leaders are. So you appoint who you want, where you want. People have to vote for you, by the way.
But Julius, that's
And
the
we've got
nature
a
of
plan.
politics the world over, surely. It's all about the acquisition and the holding on to power.
I think the question
Is it worse here?
what does politics have to do in a municipality? The municipality's got a very clear mandate. It's supposed to provide basic services and the foundation for an economy and business to do its job. And Fortress and other companies in the world don't invest in a country. They invest in that street or that address.
Yeah.
It's where your kids go to school. It's where you live. It's where you do business. So I think it's very important. And I think that's the one thing I wanted to touch on that you've mentioned. We need to start focusing on community. Whilst we have elections coming up and all those kind of things where you can hopefully change leadership, the change starts here where we stay, where the real leaders are, we know them, where we get them active, where we start networking with others, as you've mentioned in a Howick example. That's where we're really going to see a change. And I like to refer to 3 T's, and I know I'm speaking too much now, but it's the 3 T's of community building: time, tithe, and talent. All of us have that. All of us have some time that you can actually expend in your community. You've got talent, so do what you love in your community, and you've got time. Support organizations and entities such as the fella from Howick. We're starting a new narrative now called co-governance. If you just think quickly, this government is not governing. The police force is much smaller than the private security sector. People are going solar instead of getting electricity from Eskom. So in our communities, we need to become very organized. There's a lot of those examples. At Outana, we're talking about the Community Action Network. It's all about harnessing the energy of existing entities or creating new organized community structures. This is basically communities like residents and business that come together and they become organized. And it's becoming a full-time capacity that has oversight on your municipality's affairs. And now you're starting to see a real democracy evolving because people are participating in local government, in the business of local government. And I think that is where the future lies of our municipalities.
Okay. Julius, for the moment, thank you. Okay. I want to bring the conversation back to that relationship between local government and the property space. And I know exactly what Dirk has been saying to himself. He's been saying, why are all the other people talking? Why is this moderator not giving me a chance to talk? And he's getting very upset. So Dirk, how much teamwork is there at the moment between local government and local retailers or the local property space to stimulate the local economy? Where does it work and where is the deficiency? And try and recalibrate the conversation back to the original topic. Please don't mention the word potholes for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Jeremy, and also not partnership and collaboration. Right? Those are 2.
Tough one.
I was actually going to ask Risa next to me just quickly on the colors of the political parties. I see you guys have chosen all the colors. So.
These
I
are
like
actually,
that.
this is the South African flag.
Okay.
Colors.
Very nice. Getting back to Jeremy's question, Jeremy, if we go back to the history of shopping center development in South Africa, and I think it talks to...
Is this going to be a long story?
No, very short.
Can I just interrupt you one moment? We have a phrase in the media, if you ask a question and you hope they're not going to Mantashi it, okay? And I fear that you're going to Mantashi it. Because if you talk to Gweli Mantashi, and it's a trick, you say to him, the minister, you ask him a question, he leans thoughtfully, he closes his eyes, and he says, to answer that, I need to go back to 1986. At which point you want to pull out a crossbow, okay? Because you've only got a 5-minute interview. Not too much context. Don't touch it.
Last 30 years. No, just quickly, obviously, as Vuso also alluded to, shopping center development acts as catalyst for not only economic and local economic development, but community development, as Julius was referring to. But so we always talk about the growth in the shopping center industry, and we in South Africa is actually top in globally in terms of providing proper shopping centers to our consumers, and that would. So it means that if you travel globally and you go to shopping centers in other countries, developed countries, our shopping centers are on par with those shopping centers. We top 5, top 6 in the number of shopping centers. So we do have a lot of shopping centers. So we do have a consumer, a good, strong consumer. But getting back to talking to the partnership between, sorry, that's another beer. local government and developers, landlords, that growth from 500 shopping centers 30 years ago to 2,500 shopping centers, 27 million square meters. That wouldn't have happened without the partnership between local government and the developers. So I'm just saying that it all seems bad, but if we look back at the last 30 years, there's been good development, good growth in the retail sector.
All right, so now we've honed in on the fact that the partnership, the collaboration, the relationship of trust is important. There is deficiency as far as that's concerned. Now let's start building the blueprint. Okay? As I said at the beginning, when we gathered here today, I want us to walk away this morning with some clear deliverables. Pointless coming for breakfast and having a chat and then leaving and not saying, well, this is something that can spark my business. So all of you now, I want you to start applying your mind to what defines the partnership and what is needed on both sides, with the understanding that development only comes, as I mentioned in my overview, through tactical compromise and collaboration. So it's pointless in demanding everything. So Wes, back to you then, and using your property experience, what best advice, what points can you give that is going to enable a better partnership between developer and local government? I'm hoping that there are fresh ideas from all of you. Coming to you first, the rest of you, the same question comes to you already.
So I'm going to do a Songezo Zibiism and claim that I'm going to speak about three things, but actually speak about like 7 things. But really it is 3 things. So as I'm listening to the conversation, we're talking about sort of shopping centers and development. And I think what's missing from the conversation is actually the concept of how do we build more sustainable and resilient communities in general. Shopping centers cannot just be sort of, you can't plonk a shopping center in a completely dysfunctional community. There has to be, and the word that was used earlier was shared value, right? So I think the ability to create that shared value and have an approach that really is more than just about your one development, but really asking how can we be better neighbors and residents in a community, and how do we make a community more resilient and sustainable is an important one. And of course, the jobs that come out of these projects are very important, but there are many other added benefits. You spoke, for example, about libraries and the lack of libraries and the importance of reading. I often find it so interesting. I think shopping centers are places of convening in general. And besides the actual shopping, there's probably many other things that could happen in a space like that, So why can't we integrate some of these elements into also how we think about development? And I think that's a very critical one. And then just to give an example, I think there's a number of practical examples of initiatives that have happened, not necessarily property development related, but partner with community related. So community safety is a very big issue. And there've been some good success stories. And I suppose there's indirect relation to development, because you don't want to develop in an area that is crime ridden and where people are leaving because it's crime ridden. There's a great case study very recently in Alexandra Township, which we all know Alexandra, obviously lots of challenges and socioeconomic challenges, but they had a massive issue of crime and safety. Local volunteers, community members came together and set up a community patrollers forum, and these are people who have minimal to no resources and don't need much. All they needed was like reflector bibs and whistles and flashlights so they can do their job, because they're not actual policemen. But this act alone and getting that kind of support has enabled them to bring down the safety rating of the local police station from a red rating to a green rating in less than 12 months. And it's become actually one of the most improved police stations in the country. Mind you, the police station itself is still useless, but there's just a lot less crime, and the volume of crime has reduced. And that's important, because that then is what, builds a healthier, more resilient community and makes the prospects of development more possible in that area. And then I think on a very practical basis, driving public-private partnerships, again, another buzzword, but it's in the practicalities of it. I actually just came across an article this morning about a solar farm project happening in the West Rand, which has been executed as a public-private partnership between the Gauteng province and some of the IPPs. And so it's very much also about operationalizing some of these things, initiatives to be and having the institutional framework. And there is obviously enough around kind of public-private partnerships, but I think we need to take that further. We need to deepen that and look at opportunities for public-private partnerships to be able to, whether we're investing in infrastructure or other things like energy, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I remember recently when I was part of Fortress and the massive investments that we were making into renewable energy for the purpose of, our assets at the time. And I thought to myself, goodness, this would be, if we could just 10x this, we could probably keep the lights on in Gauteng, forever. And I just think those kinds of conversations need to be happening in a much more practical way. And they are. I know that there are forums at a national level where these conversations happen, but not at a local level. And just in closing, I mean, I've met with some of the business organizations, your BLSAs, NBIs and others, and that really is the missing link. A lot of these initiatives and forums exist at a national level, and they're dealing with national problems. But at a local level, you don't have enough of the sort of implementing forums where these kind of relationships can then be managed and can be seen through to implementation. And I think that becomes really, really important. There's one such initiative happening in the city of Joburg right now that I was actually also part of some time ago. But that's translated into some tangible dividends for the city of Joburg. Slow as it may be, but it's happening. And you're able to get in the room representatives from the city, representatives from the local businesses, and actually see a few things over the line. And I think more such forums need to be established and need to exist at a local level.
Vuso, while we've been talking, we have been running an informal poll in the room, and I do want to congratulate you on winning the Best Pair of Socks award. Congratulations for that.
Thanks for voting for me.
All right, so back to the original question, okay? It's delivering the blueprint for greater cohesion. So what we've picked up so far, basic delivery of essential resources, which we often fail in, okay? Closer adherence to integrated development. Community safety is critical. We don't need to have a conversation about crime statistics. And also about the optimization then of public-private partnership with a specific focus on renewable energy. Some good ideas there. What can you add to that list?
We've got shopping centers and many other buildings. All the center managers that we've got at our buildings, I tell them whenever I see them that you have to have a personal relationship with the ward councillor. You have to have a personal relationship with the station commander, and you have to have a personal relationship with the chairman of your taxi association, because that's how you build trust and you build relationships at that level. It's at many levels. And I think there's a conversation happening in South Africa that says that business is partnering with local government. Last year, I think that some of the top CEOs in the country at a national level signed a pledge with government where they committed to assisting with the challenges that hinder sustainable economic development and inclusive economic development. And I think there's some work happening at that level. SAPOA, which is the South African Property Owners Association, has offered to the city of Tshwane engineers, QSs, and people that have expertise in infrastructure to try and help them with some of their work. we've got a shopping center in the south of Joburg. The road leading to the shopping center is in a bad state. So we approached the municipality and said to them, look, we'll fix this road. In fact, make it better than what it was. In return, we need to get some sort of a rebate to pay off this thing on rates and taxes. That's a conversation that's happening at the moment. So there are many practical things that are starting to happen. I mean, 2 years ago,
Did that work?
it's still in process. Still in process. But at least it started. This was not the case 2 years ago. So I think we need to do more of those type of initiatives. Where you are, where you operate, we need to get involved. We are part of the community. We must stop this idea that there's a shopping center in a community. That shopping center is part of that community. And we need to get involved in developing those communities where we are.
Okay, the notion of the building the relationship between the ward councillor, the taxi association, what was the third one? And the police,
Station
and the command
commander.
station commander. Have you seen that happen with practical dividends?
I have. I was a center manager many years ago. And the ability to be able to phone your station commander when there's a crisis is incredible. I mean, one of the biggest issues that we had when we had the riots was that you didn't know who to contact to come and you saw people coming through, but you didn't have someone to contact. And I think that has helped in the past.
So, Alan Denny, this is kind of partnership management 101. Why does this just not happen with more regularity? What prevents developers and centres from actually doing that?
To date, I think a lot of the interaction with council has been combative and has been pulling them up on things, rather than offering to help, which is what Vuso is saying is starting to happen now. And I think that's the key is changing that, whether it's through the existing organizations like SAPOA, or whether we need a new organization that is more grassroots driven within the property industry. We'll see if that, I mean, I think the issue is that they need to maybe approach it with a clean relationship, you know, where we're not challenging the council on rates and taxes and things like that. And I think there are lots of opportunities for collaboration. I would suggest sticking to my area of topic in terms of the approvals is that one of the key things to get systems working better would be to digitize the systems. And councils have started to look at digitizing and moving into digital platforms, but just haven't had the ability to create those proper platforms. And I think and that's probably a funding gap. And it's maybe something that a property industry organization can assist with.
Digitization in that respect? How would you get that?
I think you've got to build robust systems that are capable of handling all the flows of applications. I know Joburg tried to digitize their building plan system recently, and basically ran into problems. They couldn't pay the service provider in the end, so they lost the platform. So
what role do developers have to play in that space of digitization?
I think what's quite interesting is that by providing systems that are given out, you're not actually influencing decisions at all. So it's a bit different to even offering expertise where you'd say, well, you're putting in your people to influence decisions. This is merely facilitating a platform that can work efficiently. So it's really just a funding and development of maybe a national digital platform that can be rolled out in municipalities.
But the problem is funding.
Problem is funding, but the private sector has that funding and has a huge interest in cutting down processing times and certainty.
But there's got to be something in it for the private sector in that respect. It's not, you're not doing this for nothing. Yeah, and often they can't get the kind of guarantee that they're looking for.
Well, I think maybe just to carry on talking about it is that the private sector is paying a lot of money at the moment to try and facilitate these decisions. So we've seen the rise of runners and facilitators. So the private sector is actually paying for these decisions already. So if they can be paid directly into a system that works, that might be the way to bring the benefit.
Dirk, you were going to say?
You mentioned if your business doesn't look at AI, you're on the back foot at the moment. And I think, it's a little bit forward thinking, but to get AI, generative AI in that space, will obviously assist. There's a lot of data. we always talk about big data, and how we utilize that data is obviously crucial. And that's where cities can become smarter. And obviously the processes between developers and local government can actually, become a little bit better and quicker.
Can you mine down for me a little bit more on that? I mean, if again, I speak to a lot of people say, oh, well, we've got to look at AI. Okay, how? So in this particular space of collaborative partnership, where would you, I'm not for one moment saying you're an AI specialist,
No.
but you've raised the topic,
Yes.
so let's go there. How do you do that? Where can AI play some sort of role?
So specifically with the building plans, there is obviously a lot of documents, data coming through, but not only building plans, but if you think of smart metering, there's a lot of data coming through to understand the impact on the environment, to understand the way that a shopping center environment works with the community. So a lot of data that comes through there. Consumers move from one place to another. If you think of mobility patterns, commuters, transportation, public transportation, how we link the retail assets a little bit better to the public transportation hubs. There's data analysis that we can do to provide better options for both for the consumer, but that collaboration from the developer and the local government can, we can use AI to support, better decision making. It's a future thing, but it's
It's the
definitely
reason why
there.
we're here today. I
Yeah.
mean, people don't want to know what's happened or what's happening. They know what's happening.
Yeah.
They want to look into the future. Okay, so I'm adding to this list here. Okay, so about the thing of personal relationships, which I think was valuable. It's about offering services, okay, which I think is critical. And it's about exploring the AI space. Julius, what about you? Add to that list of growing the blueprint for more effective partnership.
Municipalities struggle with funding in the political dynamics. But a municipality very uniquely has the ability to raise its own funds. So a municipality can look at alternative ways of making money. It doesn't necessarily have the savvy to. So I think with businesses' minds coming to the party, as you've mentioned, surrounding themselves with better equipped folk, where they don't feel, I suppose, ego. The ego is, you just manage that well. You can come up with very good problem-solving opportunities to generate extra revenue. It can also address some of the
Julius, you're going
issues
to have to be more specific.
Okay.
You're being very vague here.
Let's
So
talk.
you're saying to me, municipalities
Yeah.
bringing in the right skills have the opportunity to generate more money. I understand that, but what they need to do is also not take their eye off the original mandate, which is to look after the ratepayer.
100%.
So where are you taking this conversation?
So let's speak about an opportunity that was raised earlier. We've got electricity issues. So what?
I don't. I've got solar, but I mean,
What? So the two, and you've got a lot of poor people. So why not look at how can you create innovative solutions where the poorest of the poor building structures become the supplier of that electricity to the municipality, instead of just throwing all the solar panels on the retail roofs. I think those are the kind of opportunities we can look at. All of a sudden, the poorest of the poor become economic or entrepreneurs in this space, and they're supplying the municipality with electricity that can sell it to its residents and business.
okay, so
As
let
an
me
example.
challenge you on that then.
Sure.
One, the poorest of the poor, it would take some will, some convincing to see the entrepreneurial opportunity there. It would take courage from the local authority to actually implement something like that. And my suggestion to you is that those 2 points of views are poles apart. So accept good idea. How do you start coalescing that?
No, 100%. That's, I suppose, where the challenge is. But our municipalities struggle funds. They cannot supply sufficient electricity. And I think there's a good mutual beneficial space we can look at. Same with water service provision. The new Water Services Act is becoming adapted now for public-private partners to come in. Those are the kind of innovative spaces we need to start looking at. But address the inequalities in the same, breath. Don't just look at the opportunity to make billions out of the process. How can the municipality and the poorest of the poor, because that's where the politics comes in, benefit from future solutions, the problems that we have? And I think what's interesting, and the city of China has done this now, and business, active business and organized business have become involved there. Municipalities don't have the ability for proper project management. And they're being supplemented by business to start helping them manage these projects. How many municipalities don't spend infrastructure grants and things like that? That's to the detriment of developers and the residents. And I think if you can start playing a better role in supplementing that as well, that's very important. And then lastly, I think going back to the community, organized communities, legislation really requires for, we call it a three-legged pot in a municipality. It's politicians, your administration of a municipality, and communities to run the business of a local government. That third leg of community involvement has not been properly implemented in South Africa. How many of you know what an IDP means? You know, how many of you have commented on the budget?
IDP, isn't that another political party?
Exactly.
There's so many.
So that's the integrated development plan. And that's basically where you have a say on how your municipality must spend your money.
Yeah.
You know, and for as long as we don't get organized and get involved in that, and there's not proper oversight over the municipality, we will see much of the same. And I think the last thing with that, and this is the good cop, bad cop scenario. So yes, get involved and get organized and get busy in the business of local government and make that permanent. So, but then the bad cop stuff comes in and Neil and them from struggle, you've mentioned it. But this is where you have to support organizations, and this is where I'm going to raise OUTA as an example, to do the dirty work and hold officials to account. Because it's very hard to become victimized in this space as a developing organization or company. Because for you to go, as for Fortress to go challenge a municipality can become very difficult. And I think that's where you need to start at looking at alternatives to support that do that work.
Yeah, no, this is a brilliant example because it actually demonstrates two parts of the problem. One is call it the leadership and the political will, because when you have someone who does have political will, things can move, and vice versa. But it also demonstrates the systemic issue, which is the way and structure of government, and particularly now in a coalition government type of environment, the risks that we are susceptible to now. And I suppose the third pillar of that is something that, I don't know, one of you raised earlier, which is the fact that we have not adequately insulated the operational layer, the public officials, from the political goings on. So other countries, like the Netherlands, didn't have a government effectively for 290 days or something like that. But yet life goes on because the officials are still able to continue and carry on and do their business, and projects that get signed off are signed off, and that's that. And so those are the types of things we have to address. In the mayoral system, it's particularly interesting because we have an executive mayoral system. And so when the mayor goes, basically the whole crew goes. Now that's really problematic. I personally, in my opinion, I think that's a flaw in the system. I think that is something that needs to be relooked in the future. However, those for me are the three buckets. So one, we've got to get the right leaders in place. But number two, we have to stabilize, these coalition governments and ensure that we have a framework in place, a governance framework in place that is able to provide some insulation and at least some period of continuity. So, whether you're putting limits on how frequent these motions of no confidence and things can happen, maybe you set a term on that. And I think these are some of the conversations that are being considered. And then, of course, number three was what I was talking about, just in terms of actually looking at are we still happy actually with an executive mayoral system that operates like this? And as a growing and a maturing democracy, these are conversations we are more than at liberty to have. You know, there's other conversations being had even around provincial government and the need for it. And I think we must acknowledge, you know, that the current system of governance that we have was put in place at a specific point in time with a specific purpose. It has gotten us to this point. We are now 30 years in, and we have an opportunity to start having more of these discussions that could potentially lead to the structural change we need.
And let me put this to you as the aspirant politician in the room, that if I was a property developer right now, I would be more worried than ever before, because you've spoken about the era of coalition politics. We do not have a successful track record when it comes to managing stable coalitions.
Yeah.
So while there's going to be so much focus on managing the dynamics of coalition, that the documentation that this gentleman wants signed in order to put up a housing development is not going to be in the in trade for 3 months, it's going to be in the in trade for 6 months or longer. That's something that we need to be cognizant of, or not?
Look, I think that, as I've said, I think that we are at a point of transition, and I think that our maturing into coalition governance is exactly where we are. So whether it is, we don't have, for example, even a national framework on coalition governance. We don't have any legislation that governs how they should work. This is the moment to now start creating those types of frameworks. And I'm of the understanding that those conversations are likely to start in earnest post-elections, because I think everyone has become quite alive to this reality.
But Alan Denny, we don't have time for that. Do we have time
I was going to
build
say,
those frameworks?
no, I was going to
that
say,
we
I
have
think
to talk about?
property developers in particular are long-term in nature. And so we have to take a long view on this. There is no kind of 100-day solution
how
to this.
How long is a long-term view, though? I mean, you've also got shareholders. Wow, that landed well. Alan, you have a view on that? I mean, time is of the essence.
No.
If I'm a property developer, I want that documentation signed off.
No, absolutely. And we have a very timid public service at the moment. They're very reluctant to take decisions. The bottom line is that you can get fired for non-compliance, but you'll not get fired for non-delivery. And the sooner we can change that rhetoric, the better.
With Ljubljana, if anyone knows where that is, that's the capital of Slovenia. So very wealthy guy sold out his supermarket
You
chain.
spend a lot of time in Eastern Europe.
We tried it.
Yes.
Well, used to. But anyway, the interesting thing there was it's a very wealthy guy sold out for many millions, and he decided to go into politics. He became the mayor, okay, the executive mayor of Ljubljana. And after 6 months, he held a poll with the electorate to find out how well he's doing. And he got an 85% approval rating, and he sent back 15% of his salary.
Sure.
Okay, I don't know. I've lost track of him subsequently, so I don't know if he also lost track. But yeah, so quite interesting when there's real accountability.
Yeah, amazing.
I mean, if you look at what's happening in Joburg, this is a direct result of unmanaged coalitions. And maybe what that has done is to bring it to the forefront to even the private sector to say, and this is perhaps one of the reasons that we're getting a lot of corporate activities happening, or when I say active corporates, starting to talk about these things, because we were saying earlier on that corporates have been quiet in terms of talking to government about and holding them to account. Maybe this is the start of the conversation to say, we've seen what's happening in Joburg, and that's why there's such a big focus on these coming elections. And there's a big focus on corporate getting involved in assisting municipalities themselves. So I think in this process, yes, it's taking time, but there's an urgency to it now.
Are you sensing that urgency within the development?
100%. There's a lot of frustration, and there's urgency to get things done. And that's why people are saying, how do we get involved? And that's why organizations like OUTA are getting people to listen to them, to say what avenues we need to to take to start holding officials accountable.
All right, folks, this is how I want to. We've got about 10 minutes left in the session. So what we've done is we've identified the problems. We've looked at the blueprint and what needs to happen. Now, what I want to do is I want to run down the panel and I want to ask you a question about what the starting point is in order to develop a better partnership. And more importantly, what in your opinion would signify a short or medium-term win. In other words, that old cliche about you can't manage it unless you can measure it. So we've got to have some degree of measurability here in terms of implementing a better relationship in terms of partnership.
I agree. I think, as I said, is that for me, what would be great to see would be to see some type of approach from an organized development community to assist with a digital platform creation for the approval of applications.
And if that happens, what would be an early desired outcome?
I think it's really just to get the partnership going for a start, to have an agreement, which will probably take quite a while. But then, obviously the approval process, as I said, 30 different applications and permits. Pick one area, whether it's even making building plans available digitally as a first service, and implement that.
And how far are we away from that?
I think we could be very close. I think it's going to take the political will and the building of trust between the public and private sector.
So what then is the incumbency on an organization like Fortress to insert itself into that debate? And I'm talking more metaphorically here, but we are in Fortress's HQ now. What developers need to do in that respect in order to necessitate greater haste?
Well, I think that the offer's got to be made essentially. So
I'm coming to Vuso now.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to get into it. So
yeah, I think essentially
put up your hand.
Yeah.
And here's some money on the table.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think it's that issue of how, as I said, it's been combative to date. So how do you make that repair attempt? How do you actually convince the opposing party that you're there to actually help without an agenda?
Which could be a difficult conversation.
Absolutely.
So how do you get around that?
It's probably about personalities. I think, again, you spoke about leadership. You need the leaders to stand up and start talking to each other.
We could get that mayor that gave 85%,
Exactly.
50% of his salary. Let's get that guy.
Jeremy, a few years ago, the city of Tshwane used to have what they used to call mayor dinners. And in there, you used to have the mayor and all the officials, and you used to have all the landlords in Pretoria. And there was real engagement. We may not have, this was just before COVID. And
catering put out to 10.
I wouldn't know. That's all stopped just before COVID. But at those meetings, real issues were discussed. The issue of, for instance, this is a new one, but that's something that I would have expected to come out of those engagements. So again, SAPOA has started to invite mayors to its conferences. They've done that for the last 2 years. And there you can actually speak to the mayor directly. So what I'm trying to say is, I think as an industry, one of the quickest deliverables that we can do in trying to foster this relationship is to actually set up much more of these meetings and these regular meetings and these regular engagements. For me, that if we can do that very soon, that will be a quick win for me, because you start then to discuss the issues that need to be resolved. At the moment, we're not discussing those issues.
Could I come back and counter that and say that maybe the mayor is not the right person? We've spoken about the deficiency of the executive mayoral system that we have here. Back to the person I spoke to earlier, the person taught me to stare out the window. And it's about finding the right person. And in my case as a journalist, it's a lot easier if you want to deal with issues, not to talk to a politician at all, because you'll get the same rhetoric. That is understandable. But go to the function.
Yeah.
Go to the DG.
So
it's about developers, and I'm acting as a kind of an interlocutor for them, Surely it's about the developers finding the right person to talk to. It's the station commander.
No,
example
100%.
that you gave.
So what I mean actually, it's actually the municipal manager. But when I say it's the mayor and his officials, I mean everyone in their various departments.
Okay, so you've had the meeting with the functionary. What happens then? Because we're all good at promising. I've met 5 people today. I've already promised them that I'll give them a call. It's never going to happen. In fact, I haven't met 5 people, but I'm using an example. We don't follow up. How do you follow up on that?
Let's use the example that we're talking about of the road that is leading to close to our shopping center.
I'm very anxious about this road.
You're anxious about it. Let's use that example. So we put a proposal to them, say it doesn't materialize. And then we then have the options of approaching people like Outer to say, come and help us out and try and force. We've done the engagement. Nothing has happened. Now we need to go the enforcement route. Unfortunately, sometimes it has to go that way. We haven't personally been involved in it, but we've seen how it can be successful elsewhere. So I think at some point
but enforcement doesn't build trust, does it?
But you've got to do something.
No, I understand that, but I mean, the original premise of our discussion an hour ago was that we're not going to get any of this right until we build trust. So I'm not saying enforcement, I'm all for enforcement, okay? But you've got to be very judicious about your decision making around enforcement.
No, 100%. No, I don't think you'd be silly in making those decisions. But for me, I think the starting point is firstly to try and engage. Your question was, what happens if those engagements, those promises are not fulfilled? At some point, you've tried this, you've got to move on to the next step.
So it's finding the right person to have the dialogue with.
Absolutely.
The second part of the question is what constitutes the short-term win?
The short-term win. Well, our biggest problem at the moment is infrastructure. Short-term win is, can we prioritize certain projects that we look at and implement those, working together?
So it's a question of agreement on what a quick priority would be.
Yes.
So in the case of your road, as an example,
Yes.
what would be a quick priority that would signify a win?
The municipality agreeing to the proposal that we put to them. And then we can do the work.
Okay? Outer.
I think you touched the one that I wanted to raise, is building the right relationships with the right people. That's very important. I found officials coming to us asking us to take them to court because of the political dynamics.
So you found officials asking you to help them take them to court?
No, to take them to court so that they can just do their jobs because of the political interference. So there's a lot of...
So just say that again.
Okay.
This is astonishing. So you've had an official, it's only in this country, right? They come to you and they say, take me to court so I can do my job.
100%. So you've got a lot of good staff still in municipalities. Find them, build the relationships with them, support them, back them, because these are also the people who will most likely be suspended for some silly reason eventually if they come in the way of the politicians.
Has that happened?
Oh yes,
And have you
in
been successful?
Joburg. No, we've been successful, and that's how you foster relationships. Even on a national level, we've been successful working with DGs and people like that. So it's very important, and also to be discreet in those relationships to ensure that you protect those individuals as far as you can. And then again, that's the short-term victory. And I just wanted to plant the seed. When it comes to solutions, maybe consider seeing Solga instead of a municipality, so that you can drive those solutions through a different mechanism. But I think we have to have short-term focus. It's important. But what are we doing now that can actually affect change at the next local elections? I think we need to be mindful of that. And again, I want to say, I think it's very important for business and civil society to become very organized and active. Because when you get to a point like the civic center that no one has access to, you have to start forcing the municipality to do its job through mandamus application or whatever. You mentioned, Jeremy, the libraries saga. We've been involved with the Joburg library that's hopefully going to be open now soon. But it's been closed since COVID. It's ridiculous. And there's such small projects that had to be driven. But there was no proper oversight and pressure. And I think that's really where it came through. And then just lastly, on the organized communities, if you can show a balance of force, and I'm just going to throw an example. After I was busy with a project called decay, the Joburg Community Action Network. What we're doing is we're getting all the active existing residents associations and organized business to become one network, one solidified voice that speaks on common issues, from Lenasia through to Sandton. When you've got that ability and representation, politicians listen.
Yeah, it gives you heft. I mean, there's no question.
That's a great opportunity to start a relationship. But if you don't have that, good luck opening that door.
All right, Doug?
I like this can idea of yours, and I'm thinking of the digitization that Alan was referring to, and obviously we need skills, we need those PPPs. But the can idea, if you think of generative AI, and you think of all the ideas and the stuff that works in certain communities all around, Gauteng, for instance, getting that data together, providing a product without actually somebody sifting through millions of data points of this guy did this and this worked there, we can actually assist in building AI, new technology to actually add value to that in a short term, but then obviously to drive a proper machine over the medium to long term by using technology, data, and then to adding value and providing insights.
This will give you the last word.
So I think as a starting point, I think leadership really, really, really matters. It really matters because the individuals that lead institutions, companies, cities, whatever, they define the culture. They define the culture of performance or non-performance, the culture of accountability, the culture of ethics and integrity in that institution. And I think we cannot undervalue or underestimate the importance of that. So, I mean, I think indeed having relationships with public officials is very important, but the tone gets set from the top. And we cannot circumvent that aspect. The toxic political culture that we have creates an environment whereby public officials are unable to make decisions for fear of persecution, where people who want to do the right thing cannot do the right thing because they are scared of getting hounded by politicians or being forced to do unethical things because politicians want kickbacks. So we have to get that right. And you asked about sort of what's in the short term. That's what's in the short term. We have an election coming up now. We have another one for local municipality in 2 years. So in this period, we really need to think long. We need to work long and hard and think about what type of leadership do we want and need in the city of Joburg, in Ekurhuleni, et cetera, that's going to stabilize our governance here. And then that brings me, I suppose, closer to home, which is and why I've particularly raised my hand to lead the Gauteng province, because what is hard-coded into our constitution is the idea of cooperative governance. It just hasn't been brought into effect adequately. So Gauteng is the smallest province geographically, but we have, and so, decisions that are made in the city of Joburg, get felt in Ekurhuleni and otherwise. Some people even live in Ekurhuleni but work in Joburg, etc. So the point is, we can't be having these siloed discussions. It's all very well to know one mayor here, but it doesn't work if the other one is dysfunctional. So my point is, you need to create and have effective multi-stakeholder forums where you are able to, like Vuso said, convene various mayors, business leaders, civil society, community organizations in a safe and constructive space where people can co-create these solutions and make commitments that they can be held to. And I think as provincial government, that is a critical role that is just not being played adequately, and the role of convening. So the implementation doesn't happen at province, but the convening, the coordination, the long-term planning, the oversight, the accountability, the follow-up, and the management of that whole process absolutely can and should happen at provincial government. And then I think just as a sort of second last point, I think and you spoke about it briefly, Julius, which is the importance of civil society, but I take it a step further and I say even organized business. This is not a time to be silent. This is not a time to be politically correct. This is a time to be brave, to speak out, and not because you're being partisan, but because we are critical stakeholders, and we have a right to have an opinion on how things work, and we have a right to express our opinion about what we want to see and don't want to see. And I think that what's been missing, and I've encountered it in a few different instances, but we're just not getting the robustness that I would hope to see from organized business institutions, civil society, really coming out swinging and saying, this is unacceptable. Putting a mayor who is wholly unqualified is unacceptable. And if you're going to burn us for a year or two, it's fine. But we've said what we've said, and we are going to withdraw our support from these shenanigans. And I think that boldness and that braveness is needed, because we're not victims in all of this. We are actually key participants in the functioning of our democracy. And then absolutely last is the alignment of interests. It's quite, it's obvious that we have different interests. So business has an interest to make a profit and perhaps do other things. Politicians have an interest to get re-elected, hopefully stay there. And communities and citizens have an interest, which is just for things to work and to get what we pay for. And the purpose of having these multi-stakeholder forums is exactly that, to create a forum to align interests and not be coy about those interests. Politicians want to get re-elected. How do we then, as business, put a proposal in front of someone that speaks directly to that interest? And I'm not talking about brown envelopes. I'm talking about saying, okay, we want you to stay here. How are we going to help you stay here? And what can we do collectively to make sure that you stay here? Because that makes this government stable, delivers my profits, and makes sure that the citizen gets what they need. And I think being honest about the alignment, about the interests that we all have is important, but creating spaces and platforms where those conversations can happen. So I'm agreed with the colleagues around the table. Talking. Just as an anecdote, as we are now in the last stretch of the campaign, our campaign manager says, we cannot communicate too much. We cannot over-communicate. If you want to phone anyone at 6 a.m. in the morning, and then you need to phone them again at 10 past 30, go for it, because it's crunch time. And I think as a country, we also must recognize it's crunch time for us. And the more we talk to each other, and the more we create spaces like this and more official spaces as well, the more we can actually solve our problems collectively.
That's it. Thank you.